The grand mansion of Lord Edward Thornton stood in the heart of London, towering over the cobblestone streets that led up to its massive iron gates. The sky was overcast, a thick layer of clouds hanging low, casting an air of melancholy over the city. The evening was still, the usual hum of the streets muffled by the looming fog. The luxurious estate, with its regal facade, was a beacon of wealth and old-world aristocracy, the home to some of the most influential figures in British society. Yet, tonight, the air within the mansion was thick with something far more sinister than the typical social bustle. It was thick with tension, with mystery. Inside the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers cast golden light upon the gathered guests, their laughter and chatter filling the air. A prestigious event had been held in honor of the unveiling of a rare and coveted treasure, the royal diamond. The priceless gemstone, said to be as old as the monarchy itself, had been passed down through generations of British royalty. Its unveiling was a momentous occasion, one that had drawn the city's wealthiest, most influential figures. But little did they know, the evening would soon descend into chaos. As the clock struck 10 p.m., the opulence of the event would be shattered. The royal diamond, which had been prominently displayed for all to admire, was discovered to be missing. The prized jewel had vanished from its secure case, leaving only an empty space where it once gleamed in the dim light of the ballroom. The scene unfolded quickly, the guests panicking as they searched the grand ballroom for the diamond. Yet, despite their frantic efforts, there was no sign of the gem. It seemed as though it had simply evaporated into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Lord Edward Thornton, pale with shock, was one of the first to reach the spot where the diamond had been displayed. His eyes darted around in disbelief, as if hoping that the diamond would suddenly reappear, but it did not. His breathing became shallow as the full weight of what had happened sank in. Minutes later, the police were called. The mansion was immediately sealed off to prevent anyone from leaving, but even as officers combed the estate for clues, it became clear that this was not an ordinary theft. The royal diamond had disappeared in a room filled with guests, under the watchful eyes of Lord Thornton's staff, without so much as a struggle or a broken lock. The police officer in charge, Detective Inspector Joseph Banks, quickly realized that they would need help from someone with far greater experience in solving complex mysteries. The name that immediately came to mind was none other than Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective whose sharp mind had unraveled countless complex cases throughout Europe. A call was made, and within the hour Poirot arrived at Wyndham Mansion. Poirot's arrival was met with a mixture of awe and suspicion from the police officers and the gathered guests. His impeccable appearance, sharp suit, boatie, and that trademark mustache was as much a part of his identity as his brilliant mind. He stepped out of the carriage with deliberate calm, his every movement measured, as though the events unfolding inside the mansion were merely another puzzle to be solved. Upon entering the mansion, Poirot's sharp eyes immediately took in every detail. The ballroom was luxurious but in disarray. Guests stood in clusters, whispering in disbelief, their expressions a mixture of anxiety and confusion. Poirot's gaze swept over the crowd, focusing first on Lord Thornton, who appeared to be on the verge of collapse, surrounded by his wife and a few close friends. The distraught man barely noticed the detective's arrival. So absorbed was he in the chaos. Poirot stepped forward, his presence like a calm in the storm. He approached Lord Thornton, offering a polite greeting. "My dear lord, it is a pleasure to meet you. I understand that your most prized possession has been stolen. Please, allow me to assist." Lord Thornton, barely managing to mask his shock, nodded, his hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, I can hardly believe it. The royal diamond, gone. Just like that." He gestured helplessly toward the empty display case. "How could this happen?" Poirot surveyed the room with an air of quiet confidence, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "My lord, may I examine the room where the theft occurred?" Without waiting for an answer, Poirot made his way to the display case. He glanced briefly at the glass casing, noting that there were no signs of forced entry. The lock was intact, and the case was perfectly positioned. There was no evidence of a struggle, no indication that anyone had tried to access the diamond forcefully, yet the diamond was gone, as if it had never existed. Poirot stood still for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly on his chin as he considered the situation. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself. He turned to Lord Thornton, his eyes sharp. "You say the diamond was on display for all to see?" "Yes. But no one seemed to have noticed when it was taken." Lord Thornton nodded, his face pale. "Correct. The room was filled with guests, and the diamond was locked away in a glass case with a guard watching over it. I don't understand how it could have disappeared without anyone noticing. Poirot's eyes flicked to the guests who had gathered near the display case. And what of the staff? Can they confirm when the diamond was last seen? Lord Thornton hesitated. I believe it was last seen at precisely 9:45 p.m., just before the unveiling ceremony. The guard on duty, James, was at the table near the display case at the time. I spoke to him earlier, and he claims nothing unusual occurred. Poirot nodded, his gaze continuing to scan the room. May I speak with this James? Lord Thornton gestured toward the far side of the room, where a young man in a uniform stood nervously, glancing over at the detective. Poirot made his way over, his footsteps soft on the polished wood floors. As he approached, James stood up straighter, his nervous eyes meeting Poirot's. Monsieur, I must speak with you about the events leading to the theft. Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. James swallowed hard, his hands shaking. Slightly, of course, Monsieur Poirot, what would you like to know? Tell me, James, Poirot said. What happened when you were last at the display case? Did you see anyone approach the diamond? James hesitated. No, Monsieur, waited. Was standing near the entrance watching the guests. The diamond was in its case, and I noticed nothing strange. I only left my post for a moment to help with a guest's coat, and when I returned, he trailed off, his voice catching. Was there anyone else near the display case during that time? Poirot pressed. No, sir, James replied, shaking his head. No one was near the case, I'm sure of it. Poirot's brow furrowed as he took in James's response. The butler seemed sincere, but Poirot was not convinced. Something about his nervousness didn't sit right. The first clue as Poirot's mind raced through the possibilities. His gaze fell upon a small object that had been left near the base of the display case. At first it seemed insignificant, a small, black velvet glove, abandoned carelessly on the floor. It was so out of place in the elegant surroundings, so completely unrelated to the grand event, that Poirot's instincts immediately went on high alert. He knelt down and picked it up, inspecting it closely. The glove was finely crafted, likely belonging to someone of high status. It appeared to be of the finest quality, with intricate stitching and a unique design. It was missing its mate. Poirot's mind quickly pieced together the implications of the glove. It was a clue, something someone had left behind in their haste to leave the scene. Someone had been close to the display case, someone who had a reason to get near the royal diamond. He stood up and turned to the guests, his sharp gaze sweeping across the room. The person who took the diamond is still among us, he said quietly. His voice was firm, and his eyes met the eyes of every guest present. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and a hush fell over the crowd. Poirot continued, I will find the person who stole the diamond, and when I do, you will know the truth behind this crime. As Poirot's words lingered in the air, he knew that this was only the beginning. The royal diamond had vanished under the most extraordinary circumstances, and this was just the first clue in a case that would lead him deeper into the web of lies, deceit, and betrayal. The grand ballroom of Wyndham Manor had returned to its usual state of opulence. The guests, who had once been frantic and unsure, had now retreated into a subdued murmur of disbelief. The royal diamond, the priceless jewel that had been the centerpiece of the evening, was gone. The air was still thick with tension, but now it was mixed with a sense of unease. No one dared to leave, and the mansion had been sealed off, its entrances guarded by local police officers and detectives. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, had taken charge of the investigation. His arrival had been met with a mix of hope and suspicion, as the guests and staff alike regarded the small, sharply dressed figure who had just entered the scene. He was a man of few words, but many observations. His keen eye missed nothing, and his presence alone seemed to calm the frantic atmosphere of the mansion. Poirot had wasted no time in starting the investigation. As he stood at the center of the ballroom, Poirot's sharp gaze swept over the room. His mind raced, processing the scene, the guests, and the clues. Even as the police officers milled about trying to piece together the facts, Poirot knew that time was of the essence. The longer the thief was allowed to slip away, the more difficult it would be to uncover the truth. But he also understood the delicate balance of his approach. Every word, every action, would need to be precise. Poirot stepped forward to Lord Edward Thornton, the host of the event, who was still pale and visibly shaken by the loss of the royal diamond. The nobleman had initially attempted to take charge of the situation, but the weight of his family's legacy, the very thing he had worked so hard to protect, seemed to collapse upon him in the wake of the theft. His shoulders sagged as he stood by the display case where the diamond had once been. Lord Thornton, Poirot said softly, his voice calm yet authoritative. I must ask you to recount the events of this evening. Everything, no matter how small, may provide us with a clue." Lord Thornton nodded, though his expression was distant. His eyes darted toward the empty pedestal where the diamond had been on display. I don't understand how this could have happened. The diamond was placed in its case, locked and secure, hours before the guests arrived. There were guards posted, and the staff had been instructed to keep watch over the display. I don't know what went wrong, Monsieur Poirot. It was supposed to be a secure event, a safe occasion. Poirot studied the lord for a moment, noting the distress in his voice, but also sensing a deeper unease. Did anyone else have access to the display? Or perhaps the diamond was moved at some point? Lord Thornton hesitated, then nodded. The display case was opened only once. Sir Edwin, the royal jeweler, inspected the diamond earlier in the evening, but I trust him completely. He's been a friend to the family for years. No one else had any reason to go near it. Poirot raised an eyebrow. I see. And the guards, did they notice anyone acting suspiciously? No, Lord Thornton replied quickly. The guards are professionals, Monsieur Poirot. They saw nothing unusual. Poirot nodded, his gaze now turning to the room around him. The ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and grandiose decor, now seemed empty, like a stage where a tragedy had been performed and the actors had yet to take their bows. The guests were scattered about, whispering among themselves, eyes darting nervously between one another. Some were still in shock, while others were more composed, but all were afraid of what might come next. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted as Lady Margaret, Lord Thornton's wife, approached him. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. As she extended them toward him, "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming," Lady Margaret said, her voice soft but laced with an undertone of concern. "Please, you must find the diamond. We cannot allow such a thing to happen to the royal family. This is an embarrassment." Poirot gave a polite nod, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "Madame, I assure you that I will uncover the truth, but I must ask you some questions. Perhaps you can help me understand more about the people present tonight." Lady Margaret hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the guests still milling about in the ballroom. "What do you mean, monsieur? Tell me about the key people present tonight. Those who may have had a motive to steal the diamond," Poirot said. His tone was steady, but there was a sharpness to it that demanded answers. "Lord Thornton mentioned Sir Edwin, the royal jeweler, who inspected the diamond earlier, but I must know more about him. Did he have any personal issues with the diamond or any connection to your family that could give him a motive?" Lady Margaret's eyes widened slightly, and for the briefest moment, Poirot saw a flicker of something fear, guilt, flash across her face. But she quickly masked it, offering a polite smile. "Sir Edwin has always been a trusted family friend. He's worked with us for years, and there's no reason to suspect him. He's simply doing his job, as he always has. He had no opportunity to take the diamond. He would never." Poirot studied her carefully, sensing that something wasn't quite right, but he let the moment pass, for now. "And the other guests?" he asked. "Were any of them acting strangely? Did anyone seem to show more interest in the diamond than others?" Lady Margaret thought for a moment before answering. "There was a man, an outsider, who seemed out of place. Lennox Crawford, a businessman from the colonies. He was a late addition to the guest list. I didn't know much about him, but he seemed rather eager to get a good look at the diamond. He kept asking questions about its origins, its value, and how it had come into the royal family's possession." Poirot nodded, his mind already piecing together the bits of information. "Interesting. And did he remain at the party for long?" Lady Margaret's gaze turned distant for a moment as she recalled the details. "He stayed for most of the evening, but I saw him leave just before the diamond disappeared. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now that you mention it," Poirot smiled inwardly. Lady Margaret's unintentional revelation about Lennox Crawford had provided a lead. He turned toward the exit and gestured to one of the officers. "I would like to speak to this Lennox Crawford." "The investigation begins." Poirot's investigation quickly intensified. He began by questioning the remaining guests, gathering their stories and watching their reactions. Some were nervous and evasive. Others were cool, almost too calm in their responses. Poirot noted the details carefully, his trained mind sifting through the lies and half-truths. Lennox Crawford, the businessman Lady Margaret had mentioned, was a man of medium height with slicked-back dark hair and a sharp suit that suggested wealth and power. His demeanor was confident, but Poirot could see the underlying nervousness in his eyes. Crawford claimed to have no knowledge of the diamond's theft but seemed overly eager to speak about the gem's value. It was a small detail, but Poirot knew that such behavior rarely happened by chance. "Mr. Crawford," Poirot began, his voice calm and measured, "tell me, What was your interest in the royal diamond tonight? Crawford smiled, his posture shifting slightly, though his eyes flickered with a hint of tension. Ah, Monsieur Poirot, it's quite simple. I've heard about the royal diamond for years, and tonight was an opportunity to finally see it up close. I've always admired rare jewels. Poirot's gaze never left him. You were very interested in its origins as well. The specifics, the history of the diamond. What prompted such curiosity? Crawford's smile faltered just for a second. Well, I'm in business, monsieur. I deal with rare collectibles, and knowing the provenance of an item is always important. It's simply good practice. Poirot nodded, but didn't let up. And did you, by chance, stay until the diamond was taken? Crawford's eyes darted briefly to the door before he spoke. I did not, he said quickly. I left before the incident occurred. I had a prior engagement. Poirot's instincts told him otherwise. Crawford was hiding something, and his forced calmness only made him more suspicious. But for now, Poirot let the man go, though he had made a mental note to investigate his whereabouts more closely. The first lead later that evening, Poirot reviewed the guest list one more time. As he studied the names, one stood out to Edith Winters, an artist who had attended the event under the guise of a patron. She had been quiet, almost reclusive throughout the evening, and Poirot was struck by the fact that she had spent a considerable amount of time near the display case. As Poirot made his way toward her, the murmur of voices in the background faded, and all he could focus on was the woman who might hold the key to unlocking the mystery of the royal diamond, Madame Winters. Poirot greeted her gently, his voice low. I wonder if you could assist me with a few questions regarding the events of the evening. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she regarded him, but then softened. Of course, Monsieur Poirot, how can I be of service? Poirot's gaze was unwavering. You were near the display case for some time. Did you notice anything unusual? Any guests behaving strangely, or anyone who might have had a motive for the theft? Madame Winters hesitated for a moment before answering. I didn't see anything, she said softly, though her voice was almost too soft. But I overheard something strange just before the diamond disappeared. Someone mentioned the Black Hand. Poirot's brow furrowed as he repeated the name. In his mind, the Black Hand, was it a person, a group, or something more sinister? I see, Poirot said slowly. And where did you hear this, Madame Winters? Her eyes shifted nervously. I'm not sure. It was just a fleeting mention, but it seemed important. Poirot's mind raced, connecting the dots. A cryptic, group or individual. The Black Hand was somehow tied to the disappearance of the diamond. Was this a larger conspiracy at play? He needed to learn more about this shadowy figure. The investigation into the theft of the royal diamond had barely begun, and already Hercule Poirot felt the weight of the mystery growing heavier with every new turn. As the days passed, the once grand Wyndham Manor had become a place of scrutiny and suspicion, its elegant halls now echoing with whispers of betrayal and deceit. The guests who had once admired the jewel and marveled at its history now became the key suspects in a crime that threatened to overshadow the evening's glamour. Had spent the past 2 days revisiting the crime scene, questioning guests, and inspecting every corner of the mansion. He had already noticed discrepancies in the testimonies of several key individuals, but none of them stood out quite as much as Lennox Crawford. His behavior had been too calculated, too smooth, for a man who was supposedly an innocent bystander. Crawford's quick dismissal of any suspicion, his overly polished demeanor. Poirot had seen it all before. It was the behavior of someone trying far too hard to seem unremarkable. The evening after his questioning of Lady Margaret and Sir Edwin, Poirot gathered his notes and returned to his study in the manor. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and burning wood, the crackling of the fire barely audible over the quiet hum of his thoughts. The case, though puzzling, was not insurmountable. There were too many lies being told, too many inconsistencies in the stories. People were hiding something, and Poirot was determined to find out what. The lies began to unravel. Poirot had learned much in the last few days. Lady Margaret had been shaken by the theft, but her reactions, while genuine, had seemed a little too measured. There was something about her calmness, the way she kept her distance from the scene of the crime, that raised Poirot's suspicions. She had a certain grace about her, but Poirot could tell that there was more lurking beneath the surface. Similarly, Sir Edwin, the royal jeweler, had been too eager to downplay his involvement. His alibi, that he had been at the far end of the ballroom when the diamond was taken, was shaky at best. No one had seen him leave the vicinity, but no one had directly witnessed him near the display case either. The fact that Sir Edwin had such easy access to the diamond, the very object of the theft, was another detail. that could not be overlooked. Poirot's mind raced as he pored over the guest list. Lennox Crawford was the one who caught his attention next. A businessman with a sharp sense of self-preservation, Crawford had slipped into the party unnoticed, blending in effortlessly with the rich and famous. But as Poirot had observed during their initial conversation, Crawford's cool demeanor didn't match the panic that had ensued when the diamond disappeared. He had not shown the usual signs of shock or distress that one would expect from an innocent bystander, and that alone had raised Poirot's suspicion. Poirot decided to confront Crawford once more, this time with a more direct approach. The businessman had been in the study when Poirot entered, standing by the window with a glass of scotch in his hand. The evening's earlier commotion seemed to have done little to disrupt his usual calm, and his posture was relaxed, almost as if the theft of the diamond didn't concern him at all. "M. Crawford," Poirot began, his voice measured and firm, "there is something I must ask you. You were seen near the display case just before the diamond disappeared. Can you explain why you were so focused on it?" Crawford turned to face Poirot, his lips curling into a polite, rehearsed smile. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he said smoothly, "I'm sure you've heard the old saying, a rare jewel is worth more than gold. I was merely admiring the royal diamond, as any collector would, but I'm sure you must have other questions for me. I can assure you, I had no part in this theft." Poirot's sharp eyes didn't leave him. "You seem remarkably calm, Monsieur Crawford, considering the nature of the crime. Everyone else is on edge, yet you, who were so close to the scene, seem unaffected." Crawford's smile faltered just slightly, before he regained his composure. "I am a businessman, Monsieur Poirot. Calmness in the face of adversity is a necessary trait for survival in my line of work." Poirot studied him closely. He noticed how Crawford's hand twitched slightly as he reached for his glass, his fingers betraying a moment of nervousness. Poirot also noted the way Crawford avoided eye contact when he spoke about the diamond. These small details told Poirot that Crawford was hiding something. The question was, what? "May I ask you, Monsieur Crawford," Poirot said, "if you had no knowledge of the diamond's disappearance, why did you leave the ballroom so quickly after the theft?" Crawford's eyes flashed with a moment of surprise, then quickly regained their composure. "I had a prior engagement, as I've already told you," he replied, his voice tinged with annoyance. "I had no interest in lingering after the commotion." Poirot nodded slowly, absorbing the response, but in his mind he was already connecting the dots. Crawford's quick exit, his over-polished demeanor, his lack of visible distressal of it, pointed toward one conclusion. He knew more than he was letting on. The pressure builds. Poirot spent the following day gathering further evidence, revisiting each of the suspects and questioning them with greater precision. The lies were becoming more apparent, and with each passing hour, the walls were closing in around the thief. As Poirot sifted through the collection of documents and letters he had gathered, he began to notice something strange, patterns emerging where there should have been none. The royal diamond had gone missing in the midst of a meticulously planned event, yet no one had been in the right place at the right time. No one had seen anyone approach the display case, and no one could provide an alibi for the critical moments when the diamond had disappeared. Yet, among the chaos, there were small inconsistencies, patterns that seemed to form around Lennox Crawford. Poirot knew that Crawford was the key. His connection to the crime was undeniable, and it was only a matter of time before the businessman would slip up. Poirot couldn't afford to let him out of his sight. The final confrontation, Poirot decided to confront Crawford once more, this time with the weight of his evidence in hand. He met with the businessman in a small drawing room, away from the eyes of the other guests. Crawford looked less relaxed now, his posture stiff as Poirot entered the room. "M. Crawford," Poirot said calmly, "I have had time to consider your alibi, your actions, and the inconsistencies in your statements. I believe it is time for you to come clean." Crawford stiffened, his face paling slightly as Poirot took a step closer. "Were you, Monsieur Crawford, when the diamond was stolen?" "I believe you are far more involved than you are willing to admit." The businessman hesitated, his eyes shifting nervously. Finally, with a sigh, he collapsed into the chair behind him. "I knew you'd catch on eventually," he muttered. "I had no choice. I needed the diamond. My debts were mounting, and I couldn't risk losing everything. The royal diamond was the only way out." Poirot stood still, his face calm as he absorbed Crawford's confession. "So you stole the diamond to pay off your debts?" Poirot asked, though the answer was already clear. Crawford nodded, his eyes downcast. "Yes. I made a deal with a certain party people I owed money to. They promised me protection in exchange for the diamond. I thought I could pull it off, without anyone noticing, but I underestimated you, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot gave a small nod, his mind racing as he pieced together the rest of the puzzle. Crawford had been desperate, and his debts had led him to betray the very people who had trusted him. But Crawford was just one part of a larger scheme, one that Poirot knew would continue to unravel in the coming days. End of Chapter 3 with the confession of Lennox Crawford. The case of the missing royal diamond was far from over. Poirot knew that this was just the beginning. The deeper he dug, the more layers of deception he uncovered. The investigation was far from finished, and was determined to follow the trail wherever it led. The investigation into the theft of the royal diamond had reached a critical juncture. Hercule Poirot had always believed that every puzzle had a solution, no matter how complex or elusive. But as the days dragged on, he began to feel the weight of the case pressing on him. The theft of such a priceless treasure could not simply vanish into thin air. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that the diamond's disappearance was just the surface of something far more intricate, a web of lies, manipulations, and hidden motives that reached far beyond what he had originally anticipated. The pressure to solve the case mounted with each passing hour, and Poirot could feel the tension building in the grand halls of Wyndham Manor. His interactions with the key suspects, Lennox Crawford, Lady Margaret, Sir Edwin, and Lord Thornton, had yielded little in terms of concrete evidence. Each of them, though perhaps not entirely innocent, had an air of uncertainty about them, as if they were hiding something crucial. But Poirot had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that a crucial piece of evidence lay somewhere in the manor, hidden, waiting to be discovered. The search for the hidden safe. Poirot had spent the better part of the morning in the study, combing through documents and personal letters, trying to uncover some hidden connection between the suspects and the royal diamond. He was sitting at a large mahogany desk when he noticed something that had previously escaped his attention. A small, intricate carving on the corner of the desk, so finely detailed that it almost blended into the woodwork. It was some floral design etched into the edge, but something about it caught his eye. Poirot leaned forward, carefully running his fingers over the carving. His mind raced as he considered what it could mean. Was it simply decorative, or was it a hidden clue, something that had been intentionally placed there to divert attention? A soft click echoed in the silence, and Poirot's heart quickened. He had pressed the carving just slightly, and the desk's top panel had shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Poirot's eyes widened with realization. Could it be? He had been searching for something like this, something that could provide him with the break he so desperately needed. The compartment opened easily, and inside, he found a collection of old documents, along with a set of carefully sealed envelopes. The first envelope he opened revealed a series of financial records, debt payments, business dealings, and investments made by Lord Thornton. The transactions were legitimate on the surface, but the sheer scale of the amounts involved made Poirot's suspicions grow. The second envelope contained a letter, hastily written and unsigned. Poirot's eyes scanned the words quickly, and his heart raced as he read the message. "I've made arrangements. The diamond will be delivered soon. You know what must happen next." The cryptic message sent a chill down Poirot's spine. Who had written it? Who was the intended recipient? And most importantly, what did it mean? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the theft of the royal diamond was part of something much larger, something that had been orchestrated well in advance. Poirot's growing suspicion of Lord Thornton. Poirot closed the compartment, and sat back in his chair, his mind racing as he considered the implications of his discovery. He had suspected that Lord Thornton, the host of the evening, might be more involved in the theft than he had initially let on. The financial records pointed to a man who had recently been under considerable strain, perhaps facing mounting debt, or pressure from outside sources. The message in the letter seemed to confirm this suspicion. Lord Thornton had been involved in something much darker than simply hosting a gala, but the letter also revealed something even more troubling. Someone else was behind the theft. Lord Thornton had not acted alone, and the message suggested that there was an external force, someone outside the family, who was orchestrating the entire scheme. Poirot knew he had to confront Lord Thornton directly. The man's demeanor had been calm during their initial conversations, but Poirot could tell that there was a hidden layer to him, a layer that needed to be uncovered. The truth about Lord Thornton's involvement was still unclear, but Poirot was determined to get to the bottom of it. The confrontation with Lord Thornton that evening. Poirot requested a private audience with Lord Thornton in the study. The grand chandelier above cast long shadows across the room, and the warm glow of the fireplace did little to dispel the sense of unease that hung in the air. Lord Thornton was already seated by the fire when Poirot entered, his face a mask of calm, though his eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. Monsieur Poirot, Lord Thornton greeted him with a tight smile. I trust you've made progress. Poirot gave a slight nod, but his eyes were sharp. I have indeed, my lord. I must ask you, however, about something I have discovered in your study. Financial records, letters, things that suggest you may be under financial duress. Lord Thornton's face stiffened, and he straightened in his seat. I have nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot. The estate has been struggling, but that's hardly unusual given the state of affairs in this country. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Indeed, but it's not just the state of affairs in the country I'm concerned with, my lord. It's the letter I found, the letter which mentions the diamond's delivery and instructions for what must happen next. Lord Thornton's expression faltered for a brief moment before he regained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about, Monsieur Poirot. I have no knowledge of such a letter. Poirot's sharp eyes bored into him. I assure you, my lord, the letter was found in your desk, and it seems to suggest that the theft was part of a larger plan, one in which you were involved. You, too, are connected to the theft. The color drained from Lord Thornton's face, and for a long moment, he was silent. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It was never meant to go this far. I didn't want this. Poirot's brow furrowed. Explain yourself, my lord. What do you mean? Lord Thornton's shoulders sagged, and he lowered his head. I was under pressure, Monsieur Poirot. Powerful men, people I could not refuse, had a hold over me. I was forced into this situation. They threatened my family, my livelihood, the diamond taking. It was the only way out. Poirot's eyes softened slightly, though his mind was still calculating. And who were these people, who forced you to act in such a manner? Lord Thornton hesitated. His hand shook as he reached for his glass of brandy. I can't say. They were too powerful. If I tell you, they'll come for me and for my family. Poirot nodded slowly. I understand. But I must warn you, my lord, that the longer you remain silent, the more danger you put yourself and your family in. You must help me to uncover the full extent of this conspiracy. Lord Thornton's face tightened with fear. I'll do anything. Monsieur Poirot, just, please, you must protect my family. The revelation, a larger conspiracy. Poirot stood by the fire, his thoughts racing as he processed the new information. Lord Thornton's confession had shed light on the diamond's theft, but it had also opened up an even darker possibility, a conspiracy that extended beyond the walls of Wyndham Manor. Lord Thornton had been forced into committing the theft, but the true mastermind, someone pulling the strings, was still out there, waiting in the shadows. Poirot could feel the puzzle pieces coming together. The cryptic letter, the mounting debts, and the threat to Lord Thornton's family pointed to a much larger, more dangerous plot. The theft of the royal diamond was not an isolated event. It was part of something much bigger, something that would require all of Poirot's skill to untangle. The case had become more than just a stolen gem. It had become a battle against forces much darker and more powerful than Poirot had anticipated. And yet, despite the danger that loomed ahead, Poirot remained calm. He had faced far more treacherous criminals in his time. This case would not be any different. Asterisk.